Hello and welcome to Media 7 Summer Editions from Auckland's Artisan Winery. In the news business they call this the silly season, although perhaps it's more accurate to call it the season of the set piece. As the usual generators of news go quiet, editors reach for the time-honoured holiday stories. We'll be taking a closer look at two of those, the weather and the New Year honours, but first, here's a holiday news mash. Close Up brought back an old tradition, the Home's Christmas party, on the occasion of the compact broadcaster's retirement from daily radio. But who could focus on Mark Sainsbury's interview with the guest of honour, while some of the year's most intriguing TV, the last and current Prime Ministers in intent conversation, went on in the background? In Britain, Channel 4's decision to invite Iran's leader Mahmoud Ahmadinejad to deliver its alternative Christmas message earned the broadcaster a bollocking from the Foreign Office. Even if, to any reasonable observer, he came across as just another windbag claiming to have God on his side. Still, spare a thought for the 23 TV viewers in North Korea who had to sit through this thrilling Christmas tribute to the dear leader. Meanwhile, Israel's government chose Christmas to start bombing Gaza and, so the media could not distort its message, posted clips like this to an official YouTube channel. The intention was to show evidence implying weapons storage, but most of the Arab world presumably just saw someone obliterating a mosque. There was action back home too, as 3 News ran a lost cat story.
Serena Hastie's cat Bruce has been missing in the Wellington suburb of Miramar for a week.
And just when it seemed that a lack of drunken misbehaviour would deprive the news bulletins of yet another New Year tradition, the youth came through. Otherwise, as ever, the holiday news was the weather. And this week we'll trace its evolution on TV. From the doodle,
and occasional showers to develop,
to the knitting needle.
A band of rain will be moving northwards in the morning.
The highest tech thing here is Penelope's hair.
You can see some cloud from it.
The weatherman as funny man.
Now, you could have told Paul about the showers in Dunedin.
Well, I could have done, but no matter what I say to him, it seems to go right over his head.
And to the 3D flyover as we know it now. The weather. It is no news to anyone who watches it that the weather plays a prominent role in TV1's flagship 6 p.m. news bulletin. The weather reports literally appear at the beginning, middle and end of the bulletin. Last year's ratings say that's how viewers like it. At the centre of it all are the One News weather graphics, introduced in 1996 and since licensed around the world. With me now is Alison Harley, who led the project to design the system. Hello, Alison.
Hi.
Now, are New Zealanders obsessed with the weather?
Well, I think obsessed is a little cruel. We are a country where lots of people go outside, so that's one thing. We are interested in it. And I think we're a country that's incredibly affected by the weather, because we're this little island, it seems obvious we're affected by it. But it's right around the world. People are really interested in the weather. Weather rates really well in virtually every country, bizarrely, even in the Middle East, where they watch it in order to see what time dawn's rising, in order to do their prayers. So the actual weather graphics and weather information is really popular everywhere. But I think the other thing is that weather is still one of those things that, well, to be brutal, can kill us or destroy us. It's one of those few things we can't control anymore. We can control politics, well, sort of, and all sorts of things about our health, but we can't control the weather. So we're really interested in finding out how to stay safe and how to be safe from the weather. So it's a pretty good reason to be interested in it.
It's been a fixture of New Zealand television since there's been television here. It was somewhat unsophisticated in the early days, but we had people like Marama Martin who everyone knew. What was the motivation to take the big step up in the 90s and go to that sophisticated graphic system? Were other broadcasters around the world doing it?
Well, I think some other broadcasters were, but the real interest was the fact that if you looked at those early forecasts, in the very beginning, we've actually got pictures of people drawing on a map with felt pen to say, here's where the wind's coming from. But it depended on you understanding the jargon, listening to a reader telling you all the stuff, and some text words. And we suddenly realised that the capability was there now to show people what the weather was going to look. We're television, we should be showing them. And the capability was there now to actually deliver graphics that showed the weather that people would experience.
Did you do any research to find out how many people actually understood the weather map? How many people knew what they were looking at when they saw isobars?
One of the first things that was done, and the research has been repeated over the past few years for all sorts of people, we showed people a weather map and an isobar map because we thought this was really important. And basically we got one group of people who looked at it and said, yeah, it's really interesting how they've got H's on it. That stands for hot. But why do they have L's? Why aren't these C's for cold? And we suddenly thought there's a group of people there who really don't know what the isobar map is. So we thought we'll do a forecast without the isobar map. And people said, oh, it's not really a weather map. And we tried to drill down, and basically it's like a doctor's white coat or a stethoscope. It's not a real weather map unless it has some weird incomprehensible stuff at the beginning. That's for some people. Another group of people, about 20% of them, basically use that isobar map to make their own forecast. They completely disregard the rest of it. They know that if that's happening, the surf will be great or it'll rain in their patch. So we've got another highly skilled group of weather people, about 20%. And then there's this bunch in the middle who are interested in what their weather is, whether they're going to the beach or the surf or laying concrete, and they want to know what it's like where Aunt Mabel, Uncle Tom lives, and they have a sort of general watch. But the fact is all of them interested in it for different reasons.
Now, I guess it's one thing to say you're going to design a graphical weather system for the rest of us, but I presume, this was early on in this sort of television. There must have been challenges doing it.
There were huge challenges, but it was a really interesting team. And looking back, I've done some project management studies, and it was a particularly good project. First of all, we had a clear idea of what we were doing, and that was we were going to show people the weather. Secondly, we had managers at TVNZ who were incredibly courageous. They could see there was a business case in actually spending a lot of money on it, but they just said, go for it, and you've got 6 months and get it done. I think the other thing was we had a great presenter, Jim Hickey, and Karen Olsen, who knew a lot about what the customer, the audience, wanted. And we also had a fantastic graphics designer. He was a sort of person who, I used to joke, would dream in code, but he actually could talk English and communicate as well. And I'm sorry, but that's a rare thing in programmers. And so we had this great team along with a guy, Selwyn Ferry, who was just one of these ideas people.
Who's now a major internet developer.
Yeah.
He moved on from that, didn't he?
Yeah, so there was a great team, and it meant we knew what we were doing, but we had fun doing it.
When you say a lot of money, what are we talking about? We're talking high 100,000s?
Oh, absolutely. And remember, in 1996, the sort of graphics technology was so expensive. And so we were almost a bit early, and at a certain point we were making graphics that were too much for the technology to cope with. We couldn't get a graphics card to deliver PAL pictures. So when we had a rainy day, when there was lots of imagery in the graphics and the hovers, it actually just crashed because it couldn't cope with that amount of rain and data. So we had to change the way we were designing the graphics so that it would show less rain so that it wouldn't crash on air. We were really early on in all of this.
Now, one of the distinctive things about the One Weather graphics is that the flyover starts from the south. Was that who made that decision? Because it always sort of came across as we regard the South Island as important.
No, well, that may have been part of it, and I'm a South Islander, so that's all right. But basically, one of the problems, we would like to redesign New Zealand. One of the problems is if you're flying up the country, if you go from the top, you have to do this enormous zigzag to get Hawke's Bay and Taranaki in. So it's much easier to fly up the country. But the other really fundamental reason is that most of our weather comes from the south. So it meant we were following a cold front or whatever coming up from the south. So there were some weather reasons why we went that way, as well as some design reasons, but nothing to do with the preference for one island or the other, I'm sorry.
Did it work on the first night?
We got hundreds of calls, mainly about the fact that the text was yellow and people couldn't read it, something we never thought of. We chose yellow because if you put text boxes on a country that's covered in white clouds, you couldn't see the white, so we chose yellow. But people didn't like yellow, so we made lots of tweaks. But little things like we'd made Port Hills. When you actually did the real graphics, the Port Hills almost disappeared. So we actually made Mount Herbert, I think about 13,000 metres high in order to be able to watch it, but no one complained about that. They didn't really see that.
Now, as I said earlier, the system's been licensed around the world since it was built. It's not owned by TVNZ anymore though, is it? It's Met Service.
Yes, I should have said earlier, this was very much a joint venture with Met Service from the start. And the amazing thing was that you had Met Service with this incredible data knowledge, prepared to make all sorts of compromises in order to make the viewer understand the weather, as well as TVNZ being brave at the same time and taking this investment. So it was an amazing joint venture, and people like Stephen Harris, you know, who are the hardcore detail men of forecasting and scientists, prepared to sort of say, well, don't worry about the intensity of the rain, we'll put it this way so people can understand. And they went on and took over the joint venture when they realised there was a world market for it. So it started off being sold to Australia, all around Asia and the Middle East, CNBC, and now in the last few years, since they've taken over this project completely and bought out, they have sold it to the BBC. And that's a multi-million-dollar venture for them. And they, of course, continue supplying the data to many of these clients as well.
Now, just briefly, we've got these fancy graphics, we've got things like weather blogs, we've got weather cameras. Is there a next frontier for communicating this information to people on television?
Well, I don't know about television, but my dream is I went to the States probably 8 years ago, and they had a tornado warning. And I was in Miami, and they said, in an hour and a half, a tornado is going to hit the town, and it's going to hit the north side of this block of the street, but not the south side. And it was that accurate, and it was that detailed. And I would love, living on a lifestyle block as I do, to have a forecast that was accurate for exactly where I was, not a generic one where we know a rain might fall at the top of the street and not the end. I'd love that. And I'd also love to find a way that the graphics can show wind, because we're a windy country. And if anyone's got ideas about how we've tried flags and we've tried ripples, and it's very hard to portray wind on television. So there's my two dreams.
In the era of Google Earth and Google Maps, I'm sure they'll quite like Google Weather for our street corner as well. Thanks very much, Alison. I'm sure I'll never quite look at those graphics in the same way again. In the internet age, weather is not only the preserve of the professionals, of course. Thousands of amateur meteorologists worldwide are hooked into a web network called the Weather Underground. Simon Pound met the man behind GreyLynweather.net.
It's just before 7 in Greylyn. Rick Huntington goes through his morning routines. A shave, some toast making, and a quick spot of weather forecasting. Because every weekday morning, Rick Huntington becomes radio forecaster Rick Breeze.
Well, every morning I'm doing the weather for BFM. There's one report from outside of the studio, which is usually on my roof here. Tomorrow's looking fine and mostly sunny, just a little bit of cloud around, the southwesterly becoming westerly.
This is GreyLynweather.net HQ.
It's the lightning detector. The key is getting as exposed to the weather as possible, and that means getting as high up as possible. Do you feel fairly exposed up here? Yeah.
I've
not too bad.
been on more steady ground.
Yeah.
Home weather enthusiasts can start making their own readings and predictions using freely available and relatively inexpensive materials.
This is something I made a couple of years ago. It's a low-frequency infrared detector which measures the sky temperature or the cloud temperature relative to the ground underneath it. Inside there's the temperature and humidity sensors. This is just an automatic tipping bucket rain gauge.
Bucket rain gauges aside, the most useful information actually comes from the internet.
Pretty much impossible for somebody to do on a small scale, really, so you rely a lot on what's available from the internet.
It is also over the internet that weather enthusiasts gather and share information in a network called the Weather Underground that has 46,000 members. That is a lot of dudes on roofs. Sometimes they meet up. Rick once did to chase extreme weather in the States.
And of course, you've got the possibility of tornadoes and things, so you've got to be really, and lightning, very powerful lightning out in the open. Lots of danger involved in that, so you've got to be really aware of what's going on and fairly careful, but you see all sorts of degrees of risk-taking.
And it was that stormy weather that helped get Rick interested in the first place.
I think it was just as a kid, really. Set myself out on the front veranda with the radio so I could listen to the lightning strikes on the radio, you know, the interference from those.
And now, a few years later, Rick is still mixing radio and weather every morning around 7:45 on Auckland's 95 BFM.
The cold front to get through here, fairly late in the day, and I'm bringing a little bit of rain with it. Ready? Okay, see you.
Simon Pound with that report, and you can find Rick's site at greylinweather.net. After the break, we're on to another holiday season standby, the New Year honours.